Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're tackling something literally every single designer, engineer, and architect deals with on a daily basis, and that is workflow friction. We're breaking down a hyper-concise tip from our source material that is all about stripping away unnecessary micro-movements to keep you entirely in your creative flow. You know, when you're spending 8 to 10 hours a day inside a CAD environment, the physical and cognitive toll of just navigating menus really adds up. It's not just about drafting faster, right? It's about reducing that barrier between your brain and the screen. By optimizing the smallest, seemingly most insignificant interactions, we're actually protecting our focus and our energy. So we're going to explore how one tiny optimization can fundamentally shift how you interact with your workspace, turning what is usually a cumbersome UI navigation into seamless muscle memory.
Okay, let's dive right into this. The source kicks things off with a super welcoming, "Hello CADs, here's a quick AutoCAD tip." And while that might seem incredibly basic at first glance, we're actually analyzing the command line interface today, which, let's be real, is the true foundation of drafting efficiency. If you think about the evolution of drafting software, the command line is the original, absolute most direct way to communicate with the program. Even with all the modern ribbons, the panels, and dynamic inputs we have available to us now, the most elite drafters out there still rely heavily on this text-based interaction. Why? Because it completely eliminates the need to visually hunt for tools. It allows your design intent to instantly become an action. We're going to deconstruct exactly how fully embracing this interface, even for the most common commands, reshapes your entire approach to design.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the contrast between the two approaches. Consider the traditional visual method for a second. You're deep in thought, you're aligning a complex set of coordinates, and boom, you just need to draw a line. Moving your mouse all the way up to that ribbon to visually search for the draw menu introduces a massive cognitive cost. You're essentially forcing your eyes to leave the crosshairs, breaking your visual concentration, and switching context entirely from designing to navigating. Every single time you do this, you lose a fraction of your momentum. The alternative? Simply typing the letter L and pressing Enter. I know it sounds so minor, but the difference in workflow continuity is staggering. You are completely bypassing that graphical user interface. Your eyes literally never leave your design, your thought process remains totally uninterrupted, and the software just reacts to your keystroke right in the background.
Let's magnify this specific microstep for a second to look at the ergonomics behind why this matters so much. Relying on your non-mouse hand for these inputs keeps your cursor anchored precisely where you intend to draw. You completely avoid that constant repetitive physical context switching between the keyboard and the extreme edges of your monitor. If you were to calculate the sheer physical distance your mouse hand travels over the course of an 8-hour drafting session just to click icons, we're talking about hundreds of unnecessary feet of movement. By shifting the command initiation entirely over to your keyboard hand, you create a balanced two-handed workflow. One hand controls the spatial location, while the other acts as your command center. This division of labor not only speeds up the physical execution of the command, but it dramatically reduces repetitive strain on your mouse hand.
But of course, the very second you actually start drawing that line, you immediately hit the most common drafting requirement. Need perfectly horizontal or vertical lines? If you think about your current structural or architectural projects, absolute right-angled geometry is basically a constant, isn't it? Very rarely are we in there drafting freehand organic shapes without relying on a strict coordinate system. The integrity of your entire drawing depends on absolute mathematical precision along those x and y axes. A line that is off by even a fraction of a degree can compound into absolutely massive errors later on down the line, throwing off dimensions, hatching, 3D modeling, the whole shebang. So establishing that rigid orthogonal constraint instantly, without breaking your workflow, is just as critical as starting the command itself.
And this brilliantly illustrates the solution we all know, Ortho mode. But again, it all comes down to how you activate it. If you're moving your mouse all the way down to the status bar at the bottom of the screen to click the Ortho toggle mid-command, well, you're reintroducing that exact same workflow friction we literally just eliminated. You're pulling your cursor away from the active drawing area. Utilizing the FA key, on the other hand, acts as a continuous, unbroken action. You don't have to pause, you don't have to move your cursor. You simply tap F8 mid-stride, locking your cursor to those strict 90-degree axes instantly. It's really about keeping the execution of the command entirely decoupled from the spatial positioning of your mouse. This kind of fluid toggle allows you to just snap in and out of rigid geometry on the fly, keeping your momentum 100% intact.
So the crucial point here is what happens when you combine these actions. L plus Enter immediately followed by hitting F8. You create this single, lightning-fast muscle memory sequence that completely bypasses the user interface.
It becomes way less about remembering software commands and much more about a physical reflex, kind of like playing a chord on a piano or shifting gears in a manual car. You aren't consciously thinking about starting the line and then restricting the axes. Your hands are just executing the intent before your conscious mind even has to process the steps. And guys, this is the true hallmark of a power user. The software just disappears, the interface falls away, and you're left interacting directly with your geometry. Getting to this level of automatic response with your most frequently used tools is exactly what separates a frustrating drafting session from a highly productive flow state experience.
Now, I know it's super easy to dismiss this as just a basic tip, but let's look at the actual math of this efficiency. If practicing and utilizing these exact keyboard shortcuts saves you just 2 seconds every single time you draw a line, think about how many lines you draw in a single day. Hundreds? Thousands? Those 2 seconds compound incredibly fast. We are literally talking about saving minutes every single hour, which translates to hours saved over a month of drafting and entire days saved over the course of a year. That is precious time you get back to focus on actual design problem solving rather than wrestling with software navigation. So the real payoff here isn't just about drawing a line slightly faster today. It's about adopting an atomic habit that structurally reduces your workload and minimizes cognitive fatigue over the long haul.
So, what does this all mean for you? Ask yourself, how much time will you save by skipping the draw menu today? Keep that specific question in your mind as you tackle your next design, and really pay attention to how often your hand reaches for the mouse when it absolutely doesn't need to. Challenging those deeply ingrained habits is the first real step toward a vastly more efficient workflow. And, as the source material explicitly suggests, definitely give them a follow for more AutoCAD tips just like this one. There are always more of these little micro-efficiencies to uncover, and every single one builds toward a much better design experience. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep refining those workflows and keep optimizing.